I've had a lot of variations of pedal boards over the years, and I've also fallen into a lot of traps along the way. So today I want to do a pedal board build together and show you how I approach the build and give you some tips along the way to help you avoid some of those headaches. So today we're going to be building out this Mono rail board, which, by the way, massive thank you to Mono for sending over this pedal board, as well as this power supply to make this video possible today. As far as the pedal board rail series goes, they have 3 different sizes. This is the small size, but they also have a medium and a large size as well. So I figured I'd downsize. So for this smallest size, I'm already really liking how lightweight this is. But before we get too far along, really the first tip that I want to give you guys is to plan out your build. The age-old saying comes to mind: if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And I really truly believe that that is so true when it comes to building out a pedal board. It can be really exciting to just want to Velcro up all of your pedals and just throw them on here, but I've often found that maybe not everything fits, or I can't quite get things where I want them on my board. So as I'm diving in to plan this out, I not only want to think through obviously where I want to put all of these pedals, but I really like to ask myself, why do I want to put them in these certain places? I personally call this my workflow. So this is basically going to be what locations for my pedals are going to give me the best workflow. That's going to make it the easiest for me to hit the right pedals at the right time, so it takes as little brain power as possible when I'm navigating my pedals. A really great resource that I use all the time is Pedalboard Playground. They have pretty much every pedal and pedal board option out there, so you can really plan out your build. You can add in all of the pedals that you own and really figure out where you want to put everything before you actually sit down and start putting things on your board. One quick tip that I would give though with Pedalboard Playground is to make sure that you leave space for your patch cables. I've definitely put way too many pedals on there thinking that everything would fit, and then when I sat down with my pedals in real life, I wasn't accounting for the space needed for my patch cables, which was a huge headache. So just make sure to leave some space for those. And I'd also encourage you with your cable lengths to make sure that you're planning out your signal chain when you're planning things out in Pedalboard Playground as well. Now, once we have a game plan, I like to start with the Velcro first, and there's a lot of different options that you can use with Velcro. Obviously, there's sort of your standard industrial grade Velcro, and Mono actually has a bunch of Velcro included, which is really nice. But if you're looking for something a little bit more sturdy, maybe you travel a lot and you really just want to make sure that things are super secure, I would highly recommend this 3M Dual Lock. I actually have this on all of my pedals. I'm going to sort of mix and match today and just have Velcro on the board, but then this Dual Lock on my pedals. Dual Lock can be a little bit more expensive, but it's super secure if you want to make sure that things aren't moving around. But for me, I don't travel all too much, and honestly, most of the time, regular Velcro is just fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this Velcro on the board. All right, so our board is Velcroed up. Before I put any pedals on here though, I am gonna be mounting the power supply underneath. Mono actually does provide these mounts to just mount the power supply. Today I'm actually gonna just use Dual Lock to mount it underneath, and I will say if you are gonna be mounting a power supply or a DI box or something underneath that maybe has a little bit of weight to it, I definitely would recommend using Dual Lock because it's really gonna help it from falling off potentially. So I'm gonna go ahead and get some Dual Lock on this and mount it underneath. All right, so you can see here, I've got this power supply mounted right underneath. Couple things that I really want to point out. It is important to make sure that you leave a little bit of clearance where the power supply is actually going to go out on the side here. You want to make sure that you don't have this side maybe butting up against the corner of the pedal board where you have no access to actually plug it in. So you definitely want to make sure you've got that lined up. It's also important to make sure that you have each of your outputs where you want them. Honestly, the power supply is so important, and there's more that I want to cover on that here in a little bit, but let's go ahead and get our pedals mounted on top now that we've got the power supply underneath. So I've got all my pedals in front of me. I put some dual lock on the back of them like I had mentioned earlier. And as I'm putting things on, I'm just gonna put them on kind of lightly. I don't wanna get them too set in place just in case things change around. I am gonna follow my layout that I planned on Pedalboard Playground, but sometimes things can change when you're actually doing it in person. So let's just see how everything fits right now. All right, so everything fits. I think I left enough space for the cables. The only thing I'm a little worried about is potentially if I have enough room for the Golden Horse right here. I may need to move some things around if it's not too accessible, but I think my patch cables are flat enough to make that fit. So I'm feeling pretty good as far as the location of everything. Really happy with this workflow too. I like putting the pedals on this way first before getting any cabling done because again, you get kind of a good idea of if everything is actually going to fit or not, just in case anything needs to move around. So now let's go ahead and get our patch cables plugged in. So I've got my patch cables, and I want to talk about patch cables for a second because they are super important. Earlier on, I went super cheap with my patch cables and just got some pretty bad quality ones that died on me down the road. And if you found yourself in that position where you're playing on a Sunday and your whole signal dies, it's such a massive headache. So I highly recommend investing in good high quality cables. I personally use these EBS flat cables. I really like them. They're super flat, but they're also great quality. I've never had any issues with these. So all of the stuff I'm talking about, the patch cables, the dual lock, I'll have everything linked down in the description. But really when I'm looking for good cables, I usually just look for two things. How flat are they? Do they have a pretty flat surface here that's super easy and accessible to use? And are they also good, high quality, and feel pretty robust? So these definitely tick both of those boxes. So let's go ahead and get things plugged in. Another quick thing I want to mention with patch cables is that if you aren't using custom length patch cables, it's really important to get different sizes. So I have some of these really small ones, and then I have ones that are a little bit longer, if you can see there. This is just nice because if you need to cover some further lengths, you've got options for that. And then for the ones that are a bit closer, you've got some shorter options as well. All right, so everything is wired up as far as patch cables go. And I did actually make a small change right up here, this Golden Horse. I ended up moving it up here rather than above the MIDI switcher because it was in just kind of a weird spot and it was a little bit tough for my foot to actually engage the boost And since I'm going to be using that pretty often, I figured up on the top row next to my other drives would be a really good spot for it. Now I want to bring us back to the power supply because I think it's a really easy trap to fall into, to just go for the cheapest power supply out there, which can work, but I would highly recommend investing in an isolated power supply. These are going to be best for eliminating as much noise as possible and really just ensuring that each of your pedals is going to be powered correctly. I just personally feel like if I'm investing this much in my pedals, I also want to invest in making sure they're powered right and making sure they're as protected as possible. So this mono power supply is a great example of a really solid isolated power supply that's also thin enough and small enough to just mount underneath your board. I also really like this because there's 10 outputs, but all 10 have 500 milliamps of power, which is going to be plenty of juice to power anything that I own. But it does bring me to another tip, and I would highly recommend doing your research and really knowing how much milliamp draw each of your pedals takes. You really want to make sure that you're getting the appropriate amount of power for each pedal, especially if you're going to be daisy chaining anything and sharing power. You can cause some serious damage to your pedals if you're messing up the power requirements. So really good to make sure that you're doing that correctly. But at this point, I'm feeling good. I've got everything on here. I'm gonna go ahead and plug in my power outputs, get all of my pedals powered up, and then we'll test it and make sure that everything is working. Working just fine. The power sounds super clean. Really loving how everything turned out with this. But I do have another tip for you when it comes to just protecting your pedal board, and that's going to be investing in a good case. I've personally been a huge fan of mono cases for a long time. I've had their guitar case for a couple of years now. And if you're going to invest in a board like one of these rail boards, Mono does have some really great cases that I am a huge fan of. It's really well padded on the inside, and it actually stands up like this. It's got some feet on the bottom here, so everything is super protected. Again, I'm a big fan of, if I'm gonna invest this much in my board, I really wanna make sure that everything is as safe and protected as possible. There's also this really handy pocket on the inside, so if you wanna store any cables or straps, picks, anything like that, it's super nice having this compartment right on the inside as well. But building the board is really just the first step. You'll really want to know how to dial in each of these pedals and get them sounding really great for a Sunday morning. So in this video right over here, I walk through exactly how to dial these pedals in well. So feel free to check out that video right up here, and I'll see you over there.